Welcome to Uncloseted Conversations. Even if you stumbled upon this channel by accident, you are welcome here. The stories here are from my heart, from my soul, from my pen to your ears. I hope that you will stay a little longer and open yourself to the magic of storytelling. Here I write fiction, and though not always aligning with reality, it still tugs at heartstrings. Stories are escapes and sometimes a balm to the soul. So, enjoy your time here, and if reality presses down too loud and too hard, come knock at the door, come in, take a seat, grab a coffee, and just exhale. These are veil-bound stories, and the space is free and non-judgmental. Sit back, earphones or pods in, and let's listen to another exquisite romance. Mafia Queen's Quest for the Chef's Heart. Chapter 1. Chef Tori. Tori does not trust easily. In fact, she lives in a world where every glance, every word, is scrutinized with the wariness of prey that has survived the hunt. She is a broken soul rebuilt with duct tape and glue, no loose threads, no obvious seams to pull. Toriana Thorne, crafted her success as a chef painstakingly, brick by brick, burn by burn. And once you glimpse the vulnerable, soft woman beneath that hardened exterior, you realize there is nowhere else you would rather be than in her presence. The noise in the five-star kitchen is not for show. It is the sound of dedication, long hours of sweat, discipline, and grind. Manny, scallops, hard sear. Yes, chef. Foie gras ready for table 6. The system works only if everyone is part of the machine. Dishes move forward. Adjustments are made. Instructions are followed without question. This is what Toriana Thorne built, a well-oiled machine, each component running at precise speed and efficiency. Reduce the salt, Jess, Tori says, tasting every dish before it earns its plate. Outside, food lands on tables like quiet triumphs. Presentation is a feast long before the fork ever meets the mouth. To secure a table at Maison Lumiere, you either book 6 months in advance, or you know the head chef personally. The latter is far more impossible than the former. The silence between services is the eye of the storm. 30 minutes. That's all. Just enough time to refuel body and mind before the next wave hits. Not a rush, never a rush. In Toriana Thorne's kitchen, if you rush, you're already late. This is intentional productivity. Methodical movement. Precision over panic. Every sous chef, every pastry chef, every server and dishwasher was chosen not for brilliance, but for efficiency. For foresight. You must think 10 steps ahead and anticipate 5 mistakes before your hand ever touches a knife or a ladle. That is why her team has stayed for 5 years. They know her rhythm. They anticipate her commands before they're spoken. Tori pushes through the back door into the alley behind the restaurant. Quiet. Dim. She finds the bench and sinks down with a sigh. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to breathe. 5 minutes to steady her racing heart. 5 minutes to exist. Hiding. The voice is low. Velvety. Dangerous. Tori startles, stumbling back as she scans the shadows. The alley gives up only a silhouette tall, a black suit hugging a frame like a second skin. Her gaze traces heels, then climbs, stopping at a face still hidden by darkness. That voice reaches her like a forgotten melody. Chef Tori. I've been trying to get an appointment. The woman speaks lazily, as though words are tools rather than conversation. Tori straightens her jacket and turns toward the door. Table reservations are handled by the hostess, she says softly, and disappears back into the kitchen. The figure smiles and steps deeper into shadow, her whisper following the closing door. You are a language I am dying to learn, Chef Tori. Lucia Romano. La Lupa, the she-wolf. She does not take no for an answer. And she has been watching Toriana Thorne for some time now. Tonight was merely the first approach. Fearless. Controlled. Ruthless, when necessary. She does not rule with violence, but God help anyone who mistakes restraint for weakness. They learn quickly who La Lupa really is. Chapter 2. Mafia Queen. Lucia Romano had learned long ago that power did not announce itself. It waited. It watched. And when it moved, it did so without hesitation. From the shadows of the alley, she studied Toriana Thorne the way a sommelier studies a rare vintage, patiently, reverently, aware that one careless moment could ruin everything. The chef moved like a woman accustomed to command. Even in retreat, there was no panic in her steps, no wasted motion. Control wrapped around her like armor, seamless and well-worn. Lucia admired that. Strength always recognized its own. Most people mistook silence for absence. Lucia knew better. She had been coming to Maison Lumière for months. Always the same table. Always the same hour. Watching the choreography of the kitchen through half-open doors, learning the rhythm of a woman who ruled heat and steel with equal precision. Toriana Thorne did not flirt with chaos. She mastered it. The alley had been a gamble, but Lucia enjoyed calculated risks. The way Tori startled, the sharp flare of instinct before composure slammed back into place, told her everything she needed to know. Pray yes, but not fragile. Lucia smiled to herself as the door closed. Rejection did not sting. It never had. No was simply a delayed yes, spoken by someone who had not yet realized the question had already been decided. "You are a language I am dying to learn," she murmured, not as a promise, but as a fact. Lucia did not pursue what bored her. She conquered markets. She brokered peace and provoked wars without raising her voice. Violence was a crude tool, useful only when imagination failed. And Lucia Romano had never lacked imagination. What intrigued her about Tori Thorne was not the restaurant, nor the acclaim, nor the disciplines so carefully constructed. It was the cracks she hid so well. The way her breath had hitched for half a second too long. The way her eyes had tracked Lucia's silhouette before logic intervened. The way her hands, so steady in the kitchen, had curled into fists when confronted with something unscripted. Lucia liked women who believed they were unmovable. They were the ones who fell the hardest when they fell by choice. She stepped back into the night, heels clicking softly against wet pavement, already planning the next move. Not an ambush. Never an ambush. An invitation. After all, wolves did not chase. They circled. And Toriana Thorne, whether she knew it yet or not, was already inside the perimeter. Chapter 3: Precision. Toriana Thorne did not believe in distractions. Distractions led to mistakes. Mistakes led to weakness. And weakness was a luxury she had buried long ago. Back in the kitchen, the heat wrapped around her like familiarity, steel, flame, order. The rhythm snapped back into place the moment she crossed the threshold. Tickets. Timers. Plates moving in perfect sequence. This was where she belonged. This was where nothing could touch her. "Fire table 12, she called, voice steady. "Yes, chef." Her hands did not shake. Her posture did not falter. If anyone had been watching closely, too closely, they would have seen nothing out of the ordinary. That was the point. Tori was a closed book for a reason. She did not let anyone in. Not colleagues. Not lovers. Not ghosts from a past that had taught her the cost of vulnerability. Doors, once opened, had a way of never closing properly again. She had learned to seal herself tight. And yet, something about that voice lingered. Low. Controlled. Almost lazy. It had slid beneath her defenses without permission, slipping into a place no one was supposed to reach. Not desire. Not fear. Something worse. Recognition. Tori adjusted a plate with more force than necessary. Focus, she told herself. Voices were just voices. Shadows were just shadows. She had dismissed the woman. End of story. The kitchen demanded her full attention, and she gave it willingly because control was easier than curiosity and safer than wondering why her pulse had betrayed her in that alley. Still, between commands, between movements she had executed 1,000 times before, the echo returned. "You're a language I am dying to learn." The words unsettled her, not because they were bold, but because they were precise. As if the woman had seen something worth studying. As if Tori were not invisible after all. She didn't look toward the back door again. She didn't need to. Somewhere deep inside, behind layers of discipline and carefully reinforced silence, something had already shifted. Not opened. Never opened. But tested. And Toriana Thorne hated nothing more than a door she hadn't authorized, discovering it was no longer fully closed. Chapter 4: Patience. Lucia Romano took the same table every night. Corner. Partial view of the kitchen doors. Close enough to observe, far enough not to intrude. She never requested special treatment. Never sent compliments back. Never asked to meet the chef again. She simply returned. The staff learned her order by the third evening. Always precise. Always minimal. She ate slowly, attentively, as though the meal were a conversation rather than an indulgence. In the kitchen, Toriana Thorne noticed patterns the way other people noticed faces. She noticed the woman at the corner table on the second night. On the third, she noticed the stillness. On the fifth, she noticed that the timing of her courses matched the rhythm of the kitchen, as if the diner understood when to wait. That unsettled her more than curiosity ever could. Lucia Romano did not look at the kitchen the way most patrons did, hungry, expectant, demanding. She watched as though she were listening. As though she understood that a language was being spoken behind those doors, one composed of heat and restraint and unspoken command. Tori refused to engage. She kept her focus razor-sharp. Plates were flawless. Garnishes exact. Temperatures precise. If Lucia Romano thought she could learn her through repetition, she was mistaken. Tori's language was not for translation. It was guarded. Earned. Protected by years of silence and discipline. She had not survived by being legible. Still, she felt it. The weight of being observed without being pursued. The quiet audacity of patience. Lucia did not demand attention. She allowed it to arrive on its own. That, Tori realized, was the dangerous part. Night after night, Lucia came. Night after night, Tori did not look at her table. And yet she knew when Lucia was there the way one knows when a storm is gathering, without sound, without warning, simply by the shift in pressure. Lucia studied the language with care. Tori guarded it with her life. Between them, time stretched, not empty, not idle, but charged. A held breath that refused to release. And neither woman was foolish enough to mistake stillness for surrender. Chapter 5: Orders changed. Lucia Romano changed her order on the 12th night. It was subtle, almost courteous in its restraint. The waiter hesitated, just long enough for the deviation to register. "No scallops tonight," Lucia said softly. "The lamb. Medium rare." No explanation. No flourish. In the kitchen, the ticket slid onto the rail like any other. Toriana Thorne saw it immediately. She did not pause. Did not react. But something inside her tightened, not alarm, not irritation. Awareness. Patterns existed to be maintained, and this one had shifted. "Lamb, table 9, she said evenly. Her hands moved with practiced precision. Seasoning measured. Sear exact. Resting time impeccable. If Lucia Romano thought a change in order would provoke anything, she would be disappointed. Tori did not respond to deviations. She absorbed them. Still, she tasted the sauce twice. Not because it required it. Because she wanted no margin for interpretation. No room for meaning to slip in where it didn't belong. When the plate went out, perfect and unadorned, Tori told herself it was coincidence that she watched the pass a second longer than necessary. In the dining room, Lucia accepted the dish with a nod and no comment. She did not look toward the kitchen. She cut into the lamb carefully, deliberately, and tasted. A smile ghosted across her lips, not pleasure exactly, but confirmation. The language held. She ate slowly. She finished every bite. And when the server cleared the plate, Lucia said only, Please thank the chef. The words made their way back through the system like a quiet disturbance. Table 9 sends compliments, the server said. Tori inclined her head once. Noted. That was all. And yet, later, when the rush had passed and the kitchen settled into its familiar hush, Tori found herself replaying the moment with unwelcome clarity. Lucia had not rejected the scallops. She had tested the range. Tori did not like being studied. She liked it even less when the study was careful, respectful, and accurate. She wiped her hands, grounded herself in the familiar, and returned to her station. The language remained guarded. But somewhere between lamb and silence, Lucia Romano had proven something dangerous. She wasn't guessing. She was listening. Chapter 6. Testing the Boundary. Lucia Romano ordered the lamb. Again. Corner table. Same hour. Same attentive movements. The kitchen noted the shift immediately. Tori Thorne did not flinch, did not hesitate. She plated the lamb with precision. Seasoning exact. Sear perfect. Resting time impeccable. And yet, when the plate went out, her gaze lingered longer than protocol allowed. Lucia ate slowly, deliberately, savoring the change. She did not look at the kitchen, did not glance up once. Only a small, quiet nod to the server. Please thank the chef. Tori noted it. That was all she allowed herself to note. 2 more evenings. The same request. Same ritual. Same lamb. Tori's hands moved automatically, slicing and searing with mechanical perfection. Her mind, however, refused automaticity. Each repetition pulled at her focus, tiny threads tugging at the edges of the carefully sealed room she'd built around herself. She told herself it was nothing. It was routine. It was coincidence. But by the 3rd night, when the lamb hit the pass, she tasted the sauce twice. Just in case. Not for flavor. For verification. Lucia Romano was listening. She had understood. Then came the modifier. The night air carried a whisper of rain against the windows. Orders moved as usual. Until table 9. Scallops, Lucia said. Seared, but with a touch of truffle, please. Tori's eyes flicked to the ticket. Every muscle remained composed. Scallops, table 9. Truffle. Noted. Every movement precise. Played out perfect, exact. Yet later, after the rush subsided, Tori lingered longer than she intended, replaying the subtle deviation. A flavor note. A small, deliberate variation. Lucia had chosen her language carefully. The next evening, Tori arrived early. Kitchen pristine. Mise en place perfect. She had finished the first pass when a folded piece of paper appeared at the pass. No server had entered it. No explanation, no signature. Just a note, small, deliberate. Every language has its own rhythm. Yours is one I intend to learn. Tori did not allow herself to read it twice. She did not allow herself to let it linger. She tucked it into her pocket, beneath the folds of her jacket. She would address it later. Or perhaps not. Either way, Lucia Romano had spoken again. And Tori, for the first time in months, found herself listening. Chapter 7. Variations Testing. The next week followed its familiar rhythm. Lucia Romano at her corner table, attentive, patient, deliberate. And yet, she had begun to speak. Slowly. Brokenly. A modifier whispered through her order. Scallops, seared, a hint of lemon zest. Tori froze just long enough to register the hesitation, the tiny pause before the words found completion. She did not flinch. She did not respond. She merely repeated the phrase in her mind, like a mantra as she plated the dish. The kitchen never knew. The staff never noticed. Only Tori felt the shift, a tremor through the rigid lattice of control she had built around herself. The next night, another attempt, lamb, medium, rare, with rosemary. Tori's hands moved mechanically, seasoning, searing, timing each element with precision. Yet her mind had already adjusted. She anticipated the subtle variations before they even reached the pass. It was as if she had read the note before it had been written. She chastised herself inwardly. Do not let her see. She would not allow it. She could not allow it. But still, she anticipated. By the third night, the pattern had formed. A gentle rhythm of deviation, a stuttering language she had never agreed to hear, and she caught it before it landed. Every tiny modifier, every hesitant fragment of speech, Tori anticipated without conscious effort. And yet, she never acknowledged it. Not in word, not in glance. Control was maintained. Discipline remained unbroken. Still, when she passed the scallops to the waiter, plated exactly as demanded, she could feel the subtle satisfaction behind the quiet defiance. A woman at the table was attempting to speak, a language she had never wanted to translate. And Tori had already begun. The next night, the air in Maison Lumière carried its usual tension, steam, sear, silent efficiency. Lucia Romano sat at her corner table, hands folded, eyes tracing the rhythm of the kitchen without breaking her posture. She dared a small deviation, a garnish added, a word left unfinished. Lamb, rare, rosemary, maybe a hint. The order ticket slid across the pass, precise as always. Tori Thorne's hands moved without hesitation. She seasoned, she seared, she plated, but something in the execution was just slightly ahead, the garnish exactly where Lucia had imagined it before she even finished thinking it. Lucia's heart caught. A tiny thrill, dangerous in its subtlety. She had not expected it. She had not anticipated it. And yet, the chef had anticipated her. Her fingers lingered over the menu for a second longer than necessary. A second too long, and the moment became an unspoken game. Tori did not look up, did not acknowledge her presence beyond professional courtesy. And that was precisely the acknowledgement, silent, invisible, but undeniable. She dared another. Scallops, with lemon zest, and a sprinkle of thyme? The dish arrived, perfect, plated in the exact balance she had imagined. Nothing was out of place. No note, no sign, just precision that mirrored her intention. Lucia's lips curved into the faintest smile. That one micro-moment was all she needed. The game was alive. The language was beginning to answer her in whispers, in invisible threads woven into the service. She leaned back in her chair, heart hammering quietly, and considered the impossible. Tori Thorne, the woman who had never let anyone inside her world, was listening. Not openly, not vulnerably, but listening all the same. And for the first time, Lucia understood that language was a thing that could be learned, but only slowly, deliberately, night by night. Tonight, the acknowledgement had been subtle. Next night, perhaps a little bolder. Chapter 8, Pushing Boundaries. The next night, the kitchen hummed its usual precise rhythm. Orders moved through the pass like clockwork. Steam, sear, plated perfection, everything in place. Lucia Romano sat at her corner table, eyes calm, hands folded, her movements measured. But tonight, she risked a verbal tweak. When the server approached, she spoke softly, almost a murmur, aware that only those paying extreme attention might catch it. Table 9, scallops, seared, yes, but let them taste like curiosity tonight. The words hovered in the air, delicate, impossible to quantify. In the kitchen, Toriana Thorne froze for half a heartbeat. Not longer. Her hands continued their motion, plating with the same precision, seasoning with perfect timing, but something had shifted. She had heard it. She knew the intention behind it. She did not look up. She did not respond. But the tiniest tremor went through her chest. Tori had never allowed words to slip through like this. Never allowed someone to speak in fragments of her world, fragments that might, by accident, map themselves to her own thoughts. And yet, here it was. The plate slid across the pass, perfectly balanced. The garnish, the seasoning, the sear flawless. But Tori's mind had already anticipated the tweak, the subtle hint of curiosity. She had accounted for it before it fully formed. Lucia watched quietly. She didn't need to see the tremor. She didn't need acknowledgement in words or glance. She sensed it in the air, in the rhythm, in the impossible perfection of a dish that mirrored her daring. Her smile was barely noticeable. A single, slow curve of lips. A spark, tiny but undeniable. The game had begun. And Tori, Toriana Thorne, was already responding without willing it, without intending it. The nights blurred into rhythm, steam, sear, plates sliding like clockwork across the pass. Toriana Thorne's world had always been predictable. Until it wasn't. Table 9 had become something else. Something alive. Chapter 9, A New Language. The next evening, the ticket for scallops arrived. Tori had barely glanced at it before her hands moved, adjusting the seasoning with a micro-shift. Not because the dish demanded it, but because she already knew the tweak that would come. A sprig of thyme slightly off-center. A trace more salt. The lemon zest measured with precision she didn't need, except now she anticipated it. Every dish began arriving one step ahead of expectation. The staff didn't notice. The kitchen ran as flawless as always. But Tori felt it, an internal heartbeat, quiet and disruptive. Night after night, she found herself preemptively correcting, adjusting, plating just slightly differently before the order was even fully delivered. She justified it silently, habit, precision, a chef's intuition. But the truth was far more insidious. Lucia Romano was teaching her a new language, and Tori was learning it without permission. When the dish reached the table, the adjustments were imperceptible. Not a garnish too much, not a seasoning out of place. But when Lucia tasted it, her eyes flickered, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement of a mirrored intent. Tori did not see the flicker. She could not. She could not let herself see. And yet, every night, she began to anticipate the tiny hesitation in a word, the unfinished phrase, the silent pause of intent. A garnish here, a pinch there. Plates always arriving exactly as they would need to be, before the need was fully formed. It was thrilling, infuriating, dangerous. She hated it. She loved it. She told herself it was control. She told herself she was maintaining the machine. But deep down, she knew. Lucia Romano was no longer just a patron. She was the test. And Tori was failing it beautifully. Chapter 10, Absence. The first night, the ticket slid across the pass for every other table. Every dish moved as always. Precision. Timing. Perfection. And then Tori's eyes flicked almost unconsciously toward table 9. Empty. Her brow lifted, a micro-adjustment she didn't mean to make. A pause, just long enough for the staff to notice nothing. The second night, empty again. Tori frowned slightly. The kitchen hummed on autopilot, but her movements had a faint hesitation, the tiniest crack in her rhythm. The absent presence of table 9 was like a ghost brushing her shoulder. By the third night, her gaze lingered longer. Down the line of tables. Empty. Always empty. Her pulse betrayed nothing, but the recognition of its absence pressed at her chest like a weight she had not allowed herself to name. The fourth night, she found herself peering down the alley after service. The shadow where Lucia had waited. Gone. Her hands moved mechanically, seasoning and plating, timing perfectly. But internally, she felt the absence of the woman who had been nothing more than a corner of her world, now something dangerously central. Fifth night. Sixth night. Each plate passed with perfection. Each command given without hesitation. And yet, she felt it. The vacuum. The silence at table 9 pressed like a presence she could not ignore. By the seventh night, Tori's chest tightened in a way she had not permitted. She realized, with the unflinching clarity of a chef who suddenly tastes salt where none should be, She had opened a window. A window to her soul. And now she could not close it. Not fully. Not without tearing the walls she had spent years building. Tori did not move toward the empty table. Did not glance down the alley again. She did not acknowledge the absence beyond her own measured actions. And yet, every precise movement, the sear, the garnish, the seasoning was haunted. Not by perfection. Not by discipline. But by memory. Lucia Romano was gone. And Tori Thorne had already let her in. Chapter 11. Return of the Queen. The bell above the door chimed. Tori did not look up. She never looked up. She didn't need to. The rhythm of the kitchen was sacred, untouchable, inviolable. Until it stopped. A voice, soft, deliberate, familiar. A presence that had haunted her nights in absence returned. Table 9, the server said. She's here. Tori's hands were mid-motion. Knife poised, tongs in place, seasoning in hand. And for the first time in over a decade, they paused. A beat. Just one. Long enough to feel the tremor, the heartbeat, the faintest brush of memory across her nerves. Lucia Romano's order came. A single dish. A dish only Tori knew her grandmother had taught her. A dish no one else could ever request. Risotto, but just like Nana taught you, Lucia said, her voice steady but daring, aware of the weight she carried in that phrase. Silence swallowed the kitchen for a heartbeat. Then Tori moved, but differently. Not mechanical. Not precise. Not methodical. Human. Her fingers trembled slightly, a micro-oscillation no one else would ever notice. The seasoning, the risotto, the plating, all perfect, yes. But touched by memory. By blood. By something raw. Something she had thought long buried. She had taught herself to never pause. Never falter. Never allow a moment to intrude. And yet, here it was. Lucia had opened the door again. This time with intention. Every measurement, every rotation of the spoon, every sprinkle of Parmesan, carried a weight she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Tori's gaze flicked, not to the table, not to the diner, not to the alley. To the memory. To the pause. To the heartbeat she could no longer ignore. Lucia Romano had not just returned. She had arrived inside the chamber Tori thought was sealed. And for the first time, the chef realized, some windows, once opened, never close. Chapter 12. Recognition. The note arrived at table 9 like a whisper. Your grandmother would be proud. She sends her regards. Lucia Romano's handwriting, precise and deliberate, almost laughing with intent, struck Tori harder than any command or criticism ever could. Tori felt it in her chest first, sharp and undeniable. The mechanical rhythm of her hands faltered, a microsecond she could not ignore. Precision and discipline could not undo the weight carried in those words. The next night, the ticket arrived. Table 9. Scallops, risotto, everything as expected. But Tori paused. Her gaze flicked to the table, then back to her station. A decision, silent, deliberate. The dish did not leave the kitchen. Not tonight. Instead, a folded piece of paper slid across the pass to the server. Explain yourself. The staff froze, caught between protocol and curiosity. They said nothing. They did not need to. Lucia sat at her corner table, calm. Hands folded. Eyes tracing the rhythm of the kitchen like always. But tonight, she did not break her posture. She waited. She waited as the restaurant emptied, the last patrons leaving, the buzz of service fading into silence. Not a word. Not a signal. Not a movement beyond the poised, deliberate act of being there. And Tori felt the weight of it. Every moment she had tried to control the silence, to maintain the perfection, to anticipate the language without admitting she was reading it, every careful, precise adjustment had led to this. Lucia Romano had sent a challenge that could not be measured in seasoning or plating. And now, Tori Thorne could not hide behind the machine. Could not ignore the window she had opened, the soul she had unwittingly exposed. She hated it. She feared it. And she could not stop herself from thinking about it. Chapter 13. Breaching the Wall. The last patrons had left. Plates cleared. Chairs stacked. The hum of the kitchen gone. Silence settled over Maison Lumiere like velvet, heavy and expectant. Toriana Thorne stepped from the kitchen. Hands clean. Jacket straight. Every inch of her posture disciplined. She did not sit. She could not. Not yet. Not until she had an explanation. Table 9, the corner table, was empty but for the poised figure of Lucia Romano. The candle flickered, casting soft shadows across her perfect composure. Tori's eyes, sharp and measured, fell on her. She waited. The air between them was taut, electric. Every second a deliberate test. Lucia did not speak. Tori's pulse, long disciplined, throbbed in quiet betrayal. She wanted words. She wanted answers. She wanted control restored. But she did not move closer. She did not sit. She would not. The silence stretched. Minutes passed. Lucia's lips twitched with the faintest shadow of a smile, but she did not break the stillness. She would not yield. Words were hers to give, and she would not give them until Tori stepped fully into the space she had claimed. Tori shifted slightly, heels tapping ever so softly. She could sense the challenge, the weight of every unspoken phrase. She had demanded an explanation. And yet, the power, the language, remained entirely in Lucia's hands. Finally, Tori exhaled, just slightly. Not a surrender. Not a falter. But a recognition. She would wait. She would endure. She would obey the silent rules of this game, because to speak, to demand, to sit first, would be to lose. Lucia waited. Calm. Patient. All the cards held close. All the tension contained in that slow, deliberate heartbeat. And the room, once just a restaurant, just a machine of precision, was no longer theirs alone. It was theirs to bend, to stretch, to ignite without a single word. Chapter 14. You're safe. The restaurant was empty. The faint candlelight flickered across the table, casting long shadows. Tori stood rigid, hands at her sides, every inch of her posture disciplined, controlled, waiting. Lucia remained seated. Calm. Patient. Her presence alone carried intent, measured, deliberate. She did not speak at first. Instead, she leaned back slightly, tilted her head just so, and offered the chair across from her an invitation that was more statement than question. Tori's jaw tightened. She did not want to sit. She never sat. But something about the way Lucia waited, the way her fingers rested lightly on the table edge, the subtle strength in the quiet, dared her. Finally, slowly, reluctantly, Tori lowered herself into the chair. Every movement precise, restrained, yet hesitant. She did not make eye contact immediately. She allowed herself to survey the table, the candlelight, the woman across from her, before locking her gaze with Lucia's. No words passed at first. Silence stretched, charged, electric. Lucia's hands rested lightly on her lap. A slight tilt of her head, a faint curve of her lips, everything measured, everything intentional. She did not speak, but the message was clear. I know you. I know the weight of what you guard. I am here. I am patient. Tori's chest tightened. She had entered this room expecting silence, control, the usual empty rhythm after service. But now the silence carried intent, loaded with knowledge she could not see, only feel. Her mind flicked to the dish Lucia had ordered the previous night, the one only her grandmother had taught her. The memory of it rose unbidden, mingling with the tension across the table. And slowly, almost without realizing it, Tori allowed herself to lean in fractionally, not too much, just enough to study the woman before her. Her voice came low, cautious, tentative. You know her. Lucia's lips twitched in the faintest acknowledgement. No words. No explanations. Just a tilt of her head, a subtle gesture that spoke of long observation, understanding, patience. Tori swallowed, measuring her next words. "And why are you here? What do you want for me?" She did not demand answers. She did not push. She simply placed the questions carefully, like seeds dropped into fertile soil, and waited. Lucia's eyes met hers steadily. Patient. Unyielding. She leaned forward slightly, just enough to close the distance without crossing the line. Her gaze said everything Tori could not ask, everything Tori needed to feel. "I am here. I have waited. I understand. You may trust this space with me if you choose." Tori exhaled softly, a sound of surrender she could barely admit to herself. Not to words. Not to anyone else. But to the quiet, deliberate power of the woman sitting across from her. And in that pause, that careful, charged silence, Tori realized Lucia Romano had arrived not just at the restaurant, not just at the table, but at the heart of the walls she thought she had built forever. "I know your grandmother," she began, voice low, smooth, deliberate. "That is why I had to leave. I needed to understand you fully, without rushing you. Without forcing you into a space you aren't ready to give." Tori's gaze sharpened, instinctively defensive. "And why should I believe a Mafia Queen?" Her words were clipped, precise, almost cold. The edge was natural, protective. Lucia's chest tightened ever so slightly. A flinch, just a subtle shift of her shoulders, barely noticeable, yet Tori caught it. It was the only crack in her composure, the only truth visible in the calm mask. That stung. Not her pride, not her ego, but the truth of being assessed, of having to earn trust in a heartbeat. Lucia's lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Because," she said slowly, letting the words linger between them, "I believe some people are worth the wait, worth the patience." Tori's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in calculation. She wanted to test this. To probe for deceit. "And what if I decide you aren't worth it?" Lucia tilted her head slightly, just enough for the candlelight to catch her expression. "Then, I will wait longer. I can wait." Her words were soft, measured, but there was no uncertainty. Patience was her weapon. And Tori could feel it in the quiet, in the steady cadence of her presence. For the first time, Tori allowed herself to consider it. The years of discipline, control, armor around her soul, could it withstand the deliberate, patient persistence of this woman across the table? She did not answer. Not yet. Lucia's patience filled the silence like a quiet tide, pressing against the walls Tori had thought unyielding. She would not force them. She would not rush. But she would be there. Always, if she was allowed. And Tori felt the walls she had built begin to tremble, not yet collapsing, but bending in ways they hadn't in years. Chapter 15. History is alive. The apartment was silent, save for the soft hum of the city beyond the windows. Tori closed the door behind her, the click echoing like a punctuation mark in her mind. She leaned against it for a heartbeat, letting the tension from the night settle into her bones. She had sat across from Lucia. She had listened. She had felt the patience, the intent, the understanding. And yet, trust was a fortress not surrendered lightly. Her gaze fell on the small rotary phone atop the sideboard, the polished brass catching the last light of evening. She picked it up, dialed carefully, and waited. The line clicked. A familiar, warm voice answered. "Nana," Tori said, voice low, almost reverent. "Toriana? Is everything all right?" Her grandmother's tone carried concern and love, decades of wisdom threaded through every word. Tori exhaled softly, letting herself lean into the warmth of that voice. "I need to understand something. About Lucia Romano. Who she is. Why she's here." A pause. Then Nana Russo's voice, steady and comforting. "Tori, her family, they have always been kind to you. Since the day you arrived at my doorstep, they have asked nothing but to see you safe, to see you cared for. Tori swallowed hard. Memories of a 12-year-old girl, scared and alone after her parents disappeared on that cruise, rose unbidden. She had been plucked from chaos, raised in the careful hands of her grandmother, taught discipline, resilience, and the unyielding standards that now defined her life. "I don't understand," she admitted, voice quiet. Nana Russo's tone softened, patient. "Lucia, she came here for the same reason anyone should come into your life, Tori. Not to take, not to manipulate, but to see that you lack nothing, that you are safe, and, yes, to understand you. To know who you are, beyond the kitchen, beyond the walls you've built. She has patience, Toriana. The kind of patience that waits without demanding, that watches without judgment." Tori's fingers tightened around the phone. "Anne, I don't know if I can trust her. She's everything I'm supposed to be wary of." "Ah, my little chef," Nana said softly, a smile in her voice. "The world will always test you. But some people, some rare people, are worth the risk of letting the walls fall, brick by brick. Give her time. Watch her. And see what she builds with her patience. That is all she asks." Tori leaned back against the edge of the couch, the phone pressed to her ear, and let herself exhale fully. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to sit with the questions, without needing answers tonight. Lucia Romano was dangerous, precise, ruthless in her patience. And Tori could not yet admit it aloud, but she wanted to understand why she had been allowed to see it at all. Chapter 16. Step into the light. The restaurant buzzed softly, the familiar rhythm of service in full swing. Tori stepped through the kitchen doors, jacket crisp, hands steady. Every motion was practiced, flawless, but tonight carried a subtle difference. Her eyes sought her corner immediately. Table 9. Lucia Romano sat as always, calm, a faint smile teasing the corners of her lips. Not a word yet, not a gesture beyond measured presence. But Tori's gaze lingered longer, tracing her posture, her hands, the way she occupied the space, not just the table, the room. She stepped to her station, but tonight her movements held subtle shifts. A micro-adjustment in seasoning, anticipating a preference not demanded, not requested. A garnish slightly angled toward the diner, precise, yet carrying a quiet acknowledgement. The team noticed nothing, and Tori did not speak of it. Her eyes flicked toward the table again. Every plate, every movement, was a conversation without words. When the moment came to deliver the dish, she approached deliberately. Not rushing, not yielding, just moving with calm intent. Her hands placed the plate before Lucia, but her fingers hovered an inch longer than necessary near the edge, a silent question in her posture. Lucia's eyes met hers. Patient. Knowing. Waiting for the acknowledgement that was already there, yet careful enough not to claim it. Tori's breath caught ever so slightly. Not enough for the kitchen to notice. Not enough for anyone else in the room. But enough for her to feel the pull of patience, the weight of intent that had settled between them. She spoke finally, low and measured. Tonight, I want to see you clearly. Not just the diner. Not just the dish. Lucia's faint smile deepened. No words, just a tilt of her head, a subtle leaning forward that invited Tori to read the space, to engage without forcing entry. Tori allowed herself to linger, studying the small gestures, the way Lucia held herself, the quiet weight behind her gaze. She was still guarded, walls not lowered, bricks not shifted, but observation had changed. She responded, subtly, in seasoning, in plating, in micro-gestures that said, I see you. I am listening. Lucia acknowledged it with nothing more than her presence, the faintest relaxation in her shoulders, a silent confirmation that the language Tori guarded had not just been read, it had been understood. The night stretched, service flowed, the restaurant moved in rhythm, yet at table 9, the tension hummed differently. It was no longer a test of patience alone, it was a dialogue of subtle intent, each action a sentence, each glance a paragraph. Tori left the kitchen only once the last plate was served, standing nearby but not intruding. She did not speak further, did not overstep. But she had observed, had responded, and most importantly, had begun to allow herself to read the room in a new language. Lucia waited, always patient, knowing that the cracks in the fortress were not yet visible, but they existed. And Tori, precise and guarded, felt the first stirrings of something she had not named, but could not ignore, the slow, deliberate unfolding of trust. Chapter 17, I See You. The restaurant hummed with the soft cadence of service, though the last few tables had cleared. Tori moved through the kitchen with flawless precision, plating a dessert for a late-arriving patron. Her eyes flicked, as they always did, to table 9. Lucia sat there, composed, hands resting lightly on the table, fingers just barely brushing the edge of the candle. Calm, patient, dangerous. She made no sudden movements. No smile that could be pinned down. Only a shift, a subtle change in how she held her fork, a tilt of her head toward Tori as she noticed the faint tremor in the chef's hands during plating. A single, deliberate look, almost casual, that lingered just a fraction too long. Tori's fingers froze mid-motion for a heartbeat she did not allow anyone else to see. A micro-adjustment in the angle of the plate, just enough to acknowledge Lucia's presence without conceding control. She placed the dessert carefully on the pass, then exhaled silently. Lucia's eyes followed her, steady and unyielding. Not a word, not a gesture beyond the subtle, intentional provocation, a test, a question, a see if you will falter. Tori's chest tightened imperceptibly. The tiny challenge, the deliberate reading of her rhythm, the patience in the observation, did what words could not. It pried at the edge of control, at the fortress she had spent decades building. Her jaw flexed. She could have turned away, walked back to the kitchen, let the machine take over as usual. But she did not. Not yet. Instead, she allowed herself the smallest concession, a tilt of her head, a micro-nod that acknowledged Lucia's presence, her patience, her understanding of the language Tori had thought unreadable. Lucia's lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if to say, I see you. I know you are noticing me. The challenge hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. Tori felt the pull, the delicious, dangerous pull, of this slow, deliberate game. She did not answer in words. She did not allow herself to give ground beyond the micro-gesture. But she had felt it. She had read it. And she knew that the next move would be entirely hers. For the first time, Tori realized that Lucia's patience was a weapon, one that could wait, test, and observe, and she, Tori, was already reacting, quietly, invisibly, to it. Chapter 18, Micro-Adjustments. The night had settled, soft lights spilling across polished wood. The hum of the city outside was faint, the restaurant mostly empty. Tori moved with her usual precision, yet tonight her steps carried a subtle awareness. A slight hesitation here, a micro-adjustment there, an imperceptible acknowledgement of the corner table. Lucia sat as always, calm, hands lightly brushing the candle's edge. But she leaned back ever so slightly, a tilt of her head, eyes narrowing fractionally, not a challenge, but an invitation. The tiniest brush of intent. Tori's eyes followed the gesture, a subtle shift of weight in her stance. Fingers flexed ever so slightly around a plate, tilting it just so. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for Lucia to see. I am aware. Lucia's lips curved faintly. No words. Just a glance, lingering a heartbeat longer than necessary, eyes tracing Tori's movements as if reading a rhythm only she could hear. Tori exhaled softly, a slow acknowledgement that echoed in her posture. She set the plate down with extra care, just enough to let the imperceptible energy pass. Lucia responded with the slightest forward lean, just enough to close a distance only Tori could perceive, a subtle crossing of a boundary that invited engagement, but did not demand it. Tori's chest tightened. She could feel the pull, the danger, the patience. And yet she mirrored the gesture ever so slightly, a tilt of her head, the tiniest shift in her weight, a subtle lingering of the gaze before returning to the task at hand. A micronod from Tori. A soft tilt from Lucia. The table became their stage. A silent duet. Each movement a sentence, each glance a paragraph, each breath a punctuation. No words were needed, no confessions uttered, yet every subtle motion spoke volumes. Tori realized, as the quiet danced between them, that the fortress she had built around herself was beginning to sway. Not broken, not surrendered, but bending in ways she had not allowed in years. And she could sense that Lucia knew it. Knew the tension, the restraint, the careful distance. And waited. The rhythm pulsed between them, slow, deliberate, measured. And for the first time, Tori understood, this was not a test to fail. It was an invitation to engage in a language beyond words, a dance of trust and intent that might last a lifetime if they let it. Chapter 19, I Am Here. The restaurant had emptied completely. The soft glow of the candles flickered across the polished wood, painting long shadows along the walls. Tori moved slowly through the kitchen, the familiar rhythm of plating and seasoning now carrying an undercurrent she had not felt in years, and awareness, a quiet pull toward table 9. Lucia sat as always, composed, a study in patience and precision. Her eyes followed Tori's movements, but she did not speak, did not gesture beyond the soft tilt of her head, the faint curve of her lips, a silent question hanging in the air. Will you let me in? Tori's hands, usually so steady, trembled ever so slightly as she set a plate down on the pass. A tiny misalignment. The sort that no one else would notice. No one except Lucia. Lucia's eyes narrowed fractionally, just enough to acknowledge the imperfection without comment. A slow, deliberate inhale. Tori's breath caught, and for the first time in a decade, she allowed herself a glance that lingered longer than protocol demanded. Not a stare, not an invitation, not even a concession, just a small, measured acknowledgement that she saw and noticed the patience, the intent, the subtle dominance of presence that Lucia carried. The tiniest shift in posture followed. Tori leaned slightly forward, elbows brushing the edge of the table, not enough to sit, not enough to surrender, but enough to close a space that had been untouchable for years. Her shoulders softened fractionally. Her gaze held Lucia's a moment longer than it should have. Lucia's lips curved in the faintest, almost imperceptible smile. A micro-concession of her own, acknowledging Tori's small crack, her first visible act of vulnerability. The air between them thickened. Silence spoke in volumes. Every breath, every pause, every micro-shift communicated what neither dared to speak aloud. Tori was beginning to let her walls bend. Lucia was patient enough to notice. And the slow, deliberate dance of trust, of power, of intent, had taken its first tangible step forward. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The vulnerability had been shown, recognized, and returned in kind. And in that quiet moment, Tori felt something she had not in years, the pull of connection without compromise, the dangerous thrill of letting someone in, even just a fraction. The soft glow of candlelight made the edges of the restaurant blur, shadows dancing along polished wood. Tori's gaze lingered, still taut with control, still precise, but now softened by that imperceptible shift she had allowed herself, her first micro-concession. Lucia remained seated, patient, composed, but now there was a subtle change. She placed her hands lightly on the table, palms down, fingers slightly splayed, not the poised, unreadable posture she usually wore, but relaxed, open. Just a fraction. Enough for Tori to notice. A slight exhale, almost inaudible, accompanied the motion. Her shoulders dipped in the tiniest surrender, as if she were lowering a barrier she hadn't lowered for anyone. Not too far, not too much, just enough to let Tori see the weight of her intent. Her eyes softened, though her lips remained faintly curved in that teasing, unreadable smile. She did not speak. She did not reach forward. She simply was present. Vulnerable, deliberate, patient. Tori's breath caught. Not loud, not dramatic, but a quiet acknowledgement that her careful observation, her patience, her restraint, had been seen and matched. A slow blink. A tiny nod from Lucia. Nothing more. That single micromovement carried a world of meaning. I am here. I am patient. I can wait for you. And yet, I choose to let you see a fragment of me. Tori's fingers twitched, unconsciously mirroring the subtle openness. She remained standing, precise, composed, but she felt the pull of that vulnerability like a current beneath her skin. Lucia's micro-concessions stretched time. A moment passed in the silent conversation of presence until Tori's chest tightened, shoulders easing fractionally. She did not sit. She did not reach. She only acknowledged. And that acknowledgement was enough. The air between them hummed with the slow, deliberate rhythm of their dance. Neither had said a word, yet the first real exchange of vulnerability had occurred. Each had shown a crack, mirrored it in the other, and tested the patience and trust that now threaded invisibly across the table. Chapter 20. The wall was breached. The candle between them burned low, its flame wavering, casting soft gold across Lucia's hands still resting open on the table. The air was thick with everything that hadn't been said. Lucia lifted her gaze, steady, unflinching. This time, she did not let silence speak for her. "Tori and a thorn," she said, her voice low, smooth, deliberate, each syllable placed with care. Not Chef. Not Tori. Toriana. The name landed like a key in a lock that hadn't been touched in years. Tori's spine straightened instinctively. Her heartbeat stuttered, just once. "I want to know more of you," Lucia continued, calm, patient, but unmistakably bold. Not the precision. Not the discipline. Not the fortress. A faint curve of her lips. "You." Tori's fingers curled slightly at her side, the walls rising on reflex. "You don't even know what you're asking," she said, measured, cautious. Lucia tilted her head, just a fraction. "I do." A pause. Then, softly, deliberately. "The only way is if I take you out to dinner." Tori blinked once, caught off guard by the simplicity of it. The audacity. The quiet confidence. Lucia leaned back slightly, giving space, not pressure. "I know you're a five-star chef," she added, her voice threading with a subtle warmth. "But allow me to surprise you." The word surprise lingered between them like a dare. Tori studied her, searching for calculation, for manipulation, for anything sharp behind the patience. What she found instead was stillness. Waiting. "You don't rush," Tori murmured, more observation than accusation. Lucia's smile deepened, just a touch. "No. I wait for what's worth it." Silence fell again, but it was different now, charged, expectant, alive. Tori exhaled slowly, the sound barely there. She did not say yes. She did not say no. But she did something far more dangerous. She considered it. And Lucia saw that. Her eyes softened, not in victory, but in acknowledgement. The bold step had been taken. The invitation laid gently, deliberately, on the table between them. Not a demand. Not a chase. Just a door. And for the first time in a long, long while, Tori stood in front of it and did not immediately turn away. Chapter 21. Patience mocketh the woman. Tori leaned back slightly, the edge of the chair pressing into her palms. Her eyes didn't leave Lucia's, steady and calculating, reading every nuance, every subtle weight in her posture. The restaurant's quiet hummed around them, but at table 9, time seemed suspended. "You want to know me," Tori said, slowly, measured. Her voice was soft but firm, each word deliberate, like seasoning added just enough to coax out a flavor without overwhelming. And yet, the way to me isn't through dinner. Not yet. Lucia's brow lifted, faint but deliberate, intrigued rather than deterred. Tori's fingers flexed over the edge of the table, the first visible micro-gesture of her own vulnerability. Her gaze softened fractionally, just enough for Lucia to notice. "The only way to understand me," Tori continued, "is through what I allow you to see, and through patience. Both yours and mine." She leaned back, crossing her arms lightly, posture controlled but not defensive. The words were a challenge dressed as an explanation. A subtle boundary, yet an acknowledgement that she had heard the invitation. Lucia let the silence stretch, patient, letting Tori's rhythm set the pace. She smiled faintly, knowing the countermove for what it was, an invitation on Tori's terms, a dance of intent and restraint. "And if I wait?" Lucia whispered softly, leaning forward just a fraction, eyes locking with Tori's. Tori's lips curved in the faintest, imperceptible smile. "Then you will understand why the waiting is worth it." A pause hung between them, electric, unspoken. Tori had neither accepted nor refused. She had set the terms, kept control, but opened the tiniest window, just enough for Lucia to feel the possibility. The air shifted. The dance continued. The slow burn deepened. Lucia didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes, her posture, her measured patience said it all. Tori understood, and for the first time, she realized letting someone in even just a crack is far more intoxicating than she had allowed herself to imagine. Lucia leaned back in her chair just slightly, letting the candlelight catch the faint curve of her lips. She did not speak immediately. She let the silence stretch, let the weight of Tori's words settle in the space between them. Her fingers traced the edge of the table lazily, almost distracted, yet deliberate enough that Tori noticed the subtleties. Not a challenge, not a demand. Just a quiet, deliberate presence that said, "I see your walls. I can wait. And I enjoy the view." When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost teasing. "I suppose I will wait," then she said, letting the words linger, carrying just enough warmth to unsettle Tori slightly, yet leaving the decision entirely with her. She tilted her head, just enough for Tori to notice the spark in her eyes, a glint of amusement. "Though," she added, almost casually, "I must admit, the waiting has its own pleasures." Tori's chest tightened imperceptibly. The words were not bold in volume, but bold in intent. They tested without pressuring, teased without crossing boundaries, and most dangerously, they made Tori aware of the pull she had already felt but hadn't admitted. Lucia's gaze lingered for a heartbeat longer, patient, warm, and undeniably deliberate. Then she leaned back, returning to calm, letting Tori's restraint dictate the rhythm. The table hummed with unspoken conversation, micro-gestures, deliberate glances, silent acknowledgement. Every tilt of the head, every relaxed hand, every subtle smile was part of a dialogue of trust and intent. Tori exhaled quietly, aware she had just been nudged, observed, and tested without a single demand. And she realized, with a shiver that went deeper than the kitchen ever could reach, that Lucia Romano could play the long game, and she intended to. The slow burn tension now had rhythm. The dance continued. And both of them knew, in that quiet, flickering light, that it was far from over. Chapter 22. First Date. The vineyard lay sprawled beneath a golden Italian sun, rows of grapevines stretching toward the horizon in perfect symmetry. The air carried the scent of earth, sun-ripened grapes, and distant wildflowers, a palette far removed from the intense precision of Maison Lumiere's kitchen. Tori stepped carefully, her heels crunching on the gravel path, eyes scanning the orderly rows. She moved with deliberate grace, yet every muscle remained slightly taut, aware, measuring the unfamiliar terrain. She did not know what to expect. And that, That made every step feel electric. Lucia walked beside her, casual yet composed, a silk scarf catching the breeze. She spoke softly, not directing, but guiding. "You will taste the Nebbiolo first," she said, gesturing toward a shaded table set under a pergola. "It is bold, structured. Like you." Tori's lips twitched almost imperceptibly. She did not reply, only followed, observing. Every movement of Lucia's was purposeful, patient, deliberate, the kind of control Tori recognized immediately, yet did not resent. The table was a quiet tableau, bottles of wine glinting in the sun, small plates of antipasti, fresh breads, cheeses, and olives arranged with artful care. Tori's eyes took in the details, the precise slice of prosciutto, the faint drizzle of aged balsamic, but she did not touch. Not yet. She waited, as always. Lucia poured the first wine, a deep ruby Nebbiolo. The aroma rose in rich waves, and Tori's nose twitched slightly at the subtle bouquet. She allowed herself a sip, careful, measured, and then, just for a heartbeat, let a soft hum of appreciation escape. Lucia's smile was almost imperceptible, approving, patient. "I am not here to teach you, Toriana. I am here to see how you move when the rules are different." Tori's gaze flicked to her, sharp but intrigued. "And if I do not like these rules?" she asked, voice low even. "Then you will still taste," Lucia replied, gentle but teasing, "and you will still learn a little about me. And I about you." The afternoon unfolded in deliberate rhythm, tasting wines, sampling foods, sun drifting slowly across their shoulders. Tori began to allow herself tiny indulgences, an extra sip, a soft inhale of the vineyard's air, a fleeting glance at Lucia that lingered longer than necessary. Lucia's subtle guidance encouraged Tori to relax, not completely, never completely, but enough that the chef could let her guard soften in measured increments. And Tori noticed, with a thrill she did not name aloud, that the patience she had cultivated for decades was being met with equal patience, intent, and careful curiosity. By the time the sun began to dip, turning the sky into molten gold, Tori allowed herself the smallest smile, the tiniest lean toward the space Lucia had occupied beside her all afternoon. A micro-concession, but a deliberate one. Lucia's eyes caught it. A faint spark. No words were needed. The slow burn had found a new rhythm outside the walls of the kitchen, one built on sun, soil, wine, food, and the deliberate patience of two souls learning the language of each other. Stay tuned for part 2 of Mafia Queen's quest for the chef's heart. Will Lucia win Tori over, or will Tori step back into what is safe, walls, and hiding?